Before the first camera switched on and before the studio lights scattered across the polished floor, something in the air felt charged. The quiet before a match meets gasoline. It was supposed to be another easy morning in broadcast land. A veteran talk show with a loyal midday audience. A beloved public figure coming in to promote his latest film. Coffee, smiles, applause, safe questions, polite laughter. You know the drill. Except nothing about this day would be polite. Elias Vale, the man stepping into the building at 8:46 a.m., didn't fit the standard Hollywood pattern. He was famous, yes, adored even, but not for provocation, not for stirring debate, not for chasing headlines or posting righteous speeches on social feeds like currency. If anything, Elias had built his career by rejecting the performance of virtue. He'd been called humble to the point of mystery. He'd shrugged off awards, turned down multi-million-dollar campaigns, and once spent a film, premiere seated anonymously among the audience, instead of walking the red carpet, because the cast and crew deserved the attention more than he did. People didn't admire Elias Vale like they admired other celebrities. They trusted him, and trust, in today's world, is a dangerous kind of fame. That morning, the network hallways buzzed with routine-controlled chaos. Producers tapping tablets, stagehands whispering cues, assistants hustling with clipboards and stress-fueled adrenaline. The smell of coffee was thick enough to chew. In the green room, Elias sat quietly. No entourage, no loud energy, just a man in a black sweater, worn jeans, and eyes that held the kind of softness born from losing more than he ever talked about. His career had spanned 3 decades. Action blockbusters, character dramas, independent films that critics still dissected in hushed tones. Yet the reason millions loved him had nothing to do with cinema. It was the small things, the stories that leaked despite his efforts to hide them, a stagehand whose mother's surgery he paid for, anonymously, a grieving fan he sat with outside a theater for 2 hours after a screening, the time he quietly funded an entire scholarship program for kids nobody championed, no press, no fanfare, just quiet humanity in a world that rewards noise. This morning should have been simple. He was there to talk about Sentinel Rising, a new film about resilience and redemption, themes braided through Elias's career like a signature. But what he didn't know was that a confrontation had been planned, not by the network, not by the producers, by one host, Marla Vance. Marla was daytime television royalty, sharp-tongued, polarizing, unapologetically political. She'd built a brand on turning interviews into ideological battlegrounds. Ratings loved her. She loved the applause. And lately, she'd found a new mission: put celebrities on the moral witness stand. If they didn't campaign loudly enough, speak publicly enough, post hashtags aggressively enough, they were complicit. Silence was guilt. Nuance was weakness. Refusal to declare allegiance was betrayal. And Elias Vale? He didn't play that game, he acted. He donated. He volunteered. But he didn't lecture. He didn't hashtag his compassion. To Marla, that wasn't humility. That was cowardice dressed as grace. So she had prepared. Segment notes scribbled with questions sharp as glass. A false friendly intro rehearsed down to the breath. Producers unaware, she'd kept her ambush quiet. The goal wasn't conversation. It was correction. She would drag Elias into the arena, whether he agreed or not. In her dressing room mirror, Marla admired the image she cultivated. Confident, ready, righteous. She wasn't just a host. She believed she was a judge, a guardian of the right side of history. Today, she told herself, the beloved actor would finally be held accountable. Down the hall, Elias stood when the stage manager entered. 5 minutes, Mr. Vale. He nodded, offered a gentle smile, the kind that made people feel seen without trying. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister. Proud of you. Let your truth walk into the room before you do. He locked the phone, exhaled, ran a palm down his sweater to smooth the non-existent wrinkles. Nothing about him suggested he expected conflict. He was here to talk about hope in storytelling, about healing, about art's quiet power. The stage manager led him to the wing. The studio audience filled seats, murmuring with excitement. Phones tucked away, ready to clap on cue. Music swelled. The opening montage rolled. The show's theme, smiles, voices, banter, familiarity, filled the studio. The camera light turned red. We are live in 3, 2, E. Applause erupted. The host panel smiled brightly from their curved desk. A mosaic of personalities. A respected journalist, a comedian, a business analyst, a lifestyle expert, and Marla, the spark and match. "Welcome back," the lead host said warmly. Today, a man who needs no introduction. A worldwide star, a storyteller at heart, and someone whose kindness has inspired millions. She paused, smiling. "Please welcome Elias Vale." The crowd surged to its feet, cheering, whistles, hands extended as Elias walked through the aisle, shaking a few hands, offering that small nod he'd become known for. He reached the table, greeted each host with a gentle hug or handshake. Then he reached Marla. She smiled, a smile trained for cameras, a smile that carried the hum of battle beneath porcelain teeth. "Elias," she purred. "Marla," he replied, politely unaware, or pretending not to be. They sat. The applause died. Cameras zoomed in. A calm, familiar rhythm settled. The kind that precedes a storm the clouds haven't yet confessed. The opening questions were pleasant enough. His film, the emotional journey, his craft, the humanity behind the action. Elias spoke softly, thoughtfully. No rush, no ego, the way people speak when they're not trying to win anything. The audience melted into his quiet sincerity. But Marla hadn't blinked in 3 minutes. She was waiting, and when the lead host shifted to mention his philanthropic work, Marla struck. "So, Elias," she interrupted, voice smooth as a blade wrapped in silk. "You've built this reputation as Hollywood's most humble hero." Elias blinked, still relaxed. "Well, I'm grateful people feel that way. Yes," she pressed, leaning forward, smile sharpening. "But humility and silence aren't the same. Don't you think that in times like these, someone with your influence has a responsibility to speak up?" The room chilled. The audience shifted. The hosts exchanged uneasy glances. The storm had begun, and Elias Vale, quiet, genuine, unsuspecting, had just realized he'd been invited here not to talk about art, but to prove his virtue on command. The cameras didn't blink. The country didn't know it yet. But something seismic was about to unfold, and it all began with one question, soft enough to sound harmless, sharp enough to draw blood. Why aren't you using your fame to take a public stand? It was the kind of question that carries 2 meanings, the one you hear and the one you're forced to answer. On the surface, Marla's challenge sounded noble, reasonable, civil responsibility disguised as curiosity. But beneath the polished studio lights, everyone felt the truth. She wasn't asking. She was accusing. Elias Vale sat a little straighter, the quiet ease in his posture shifting. Not toward aggression, but awareness, like a pianist hearing a sour note in the middle of a symphony. His eyes studied Marla, not defensively, but with the calm of someone who has spent a lifetime deciding when to speak and when silence is the louder weapon. "I believe in doing the right thing," he began, his voice still even, not performing it. A murmur rolled through the audience, not loud but real, like air being pulled through lungs at the same time. Some nodded. Some sat frozen, hoping this wasn't when the mood would fracture. Marla's smile thinned like paper burning at the edge. "So you don't think speaking up matters?" Elias shook his head gently. "I think actions matter most. People post slogans so strangers will clap. I'd rather help quietly and let the people who benefit decide whether it mattered." The audience reacted again. Pockets of applause, instinctive and unplanned, scattered like sparks across the room. But Marla didn't flinch. "That sounds convenient," she countered. "No warmth, just a steady blade. You get praise without taking any real risk. Isn't that comfortable?" A soft hiss of breath rippled across the audience. Comfortable was not a word often paired with Elias Vale's life, but she knew that. And that was the point. He paused. The kind of pause that isn't hesitation, but controlled restraint. His fingers tapped once on the arm of his chair, the only sign of a pulse beneath all that composure. "Comfortable," he repeated, the word sitting strangely in the air. Marla leaned forward in triumph before he even continued. She could smell the beginning of a victory. Or thought she could. You've never faced backlash. You've never risked alienating anyone. You sit above the conversation while others do the work. A few audience members shifted, uneasy. The room knew this wasn't an interview anymore. It was a verdict being delivered before the trial. Elias tilted his head slightly. Not defensive, curious. "So you believe morality is measured in decibels?" he asked. Marla blinked, thrown. Only for a second. Then she recovered. "I believe silence equals complicity," she shot back. "And I believe," Elias replied softly, "that silence can be integrity." Silence in the studio now, thick enough to feel. Then a wave of applause broke through, louder, growing, organic. People couldn't help it. The phrasing, the calm defiance. It hit. Like truth often does, Marla's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Wasn't used to losing ground this early. Her co-hosts watched in quiet tension, unsure whether to rescue her or distance themselves. None of them had expected this direction. The producers in the booth were already exchanging frantic looks, sensing a crackling energy they couldn't control. Elias adjusted the cuff of his sweater, an absent gesture. A man tidying a thought, not his sleeve. "When someone shouts, they often shout for themselves," he continued. "When someone helps privately, they help for others." More applause, louder, sustained. Marla waited, letting the clapping die down, her face a portrait of controlled poise. The smile returned, tighter now, like a ribbon pulled too hard around a gift box that might burst open. "So," she said slowly, "you think those who speak publicly are less genuine than you?" It was a trap, a classic pivot. Make him look like the one passing judgment, but Elias didn't bite. "No," he said. "I think people express care differently. Some loudly, some quietly. I only object to the idea that one method is morally superior." A beat. Then, "And I object even more to judging others based on how loudly they grieve, serve, or fight." The air trembled. The line didn't roar, it landed. With weight. With truth, Marla's eyes narrowed. Not angry, calculating. She'd assumed Elias would be soft, passive, maybe even apologetic. But he wasn't defensive. He was steady, controlled, measured enough to be dangerous to her narrative. "This isn't about grief or service," she pressed. "This is about refusing to stand up, refusing to take a side." He turned slightly toward her, face calm. "You don't know where I stand," he answered. "You only know where I stand publicly. And those are different things." The audience reacted again. Energy simmering now, swelling in pockets. Elias had not raised his voice, not leaned forward, not broken composure. Yet somehow he was winning, and Marla knew it, which only made her more determined to claw control back. "People look up to you," she insisted. "Don't you feel duty to guide them?" Elias smiled. Not mocking, but sad. Guidance without humility is control in disguise. You could feel the vibration in the room. A hum, a pulse, the kind that hits when truth runs bare and unfiltered. Someone in the audience said softly, "Wow." Marla's fingers twitched around her note cards, as if squeezing them could stabilize the shifting ground beneath her. "So you're saying," she pushed, voice tightening, "that people like me, who speak out, are doing it for attention." There it was. The pivot from ideology to ego. Elias looked at her with sincere, almost gentle eyes. Not attacking, reflecting. I'm saying impact matters more than visibility, he replied. And sometimes the loudest voices change nothing, except the volume. A shockwave of applause. Bigger this time, sustained. The kind that isn't just support, it's recognition. People didn't just hear the line. They felt it. Marla's lips parted. Stunned, if only for a moment. She hadn't expected Grace to be sharper than her sharpened questions. He hadn't insulted her. He hadn't attacked her. He hadn't raised his voice. He'd simply held his ground without stepping on hers. And somehow, that left her feeling smaller. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Brief, but visible enough that cameras would replay it for days if they could. Elias watched her gently. Not gloating, not assertive. Just present. I'm not here to win, he said quietly. I'm here to be honest. And then he added, almost as an afterthought, and honesty doesn't need an audience approval meter. Boom. Not shouted. Not dramatic, just true. The applause came again, now unstoppable, rising like thunder in a sky that moments ago had been quiet. Somewhere in the control booth, a producer whispered, "We're losing her." And they were, because the audience wasn't clapping for a man arguing. They were clapping for a man refusing to perform argument. Marla sat back, collecting herself. Face composed, but the edges frayed. She hadn't lost, not yet, but she had been hit somewhere pride doesn't cushion, and now she was about to fight harder, not to question him, but to break him. The first blow had landed. The dignity still stood. The room felt electric. This was no longer an interview. It was a collision. Values versus volume. Humility versus hunger for public confession. Quiet truth versus performative righteousness. And neither had shown their full hand yet. Everyone thought the first strike would satisfy her. It only whetted her appetite. The applause washed over the set, then thinned into a tense hush. Cameras hummed. Someone coughed in the back row. Marla Vance straightened her cards as if she could iron the air flat. She had lost the rhythm once. She would not lose it again. "Let me clarify," she said, voice even. "I am not questioning whether you help people. I am questioning why you refuse to lead people." A careful pivot. Not accusation, expectation. Elias Vale did not blink. "Leadership is not volume," he said. "It is example." A few heads in the audience nodded. Marla clocked it. She pivoted harder. "Then lead by telling them what you believe," she pressed. "Right now, on this platform, do you support the movement we discussed yesterday? Do you endorse its tactics? Yes or no?" There it was. The binary box. No nuance. No room to draw breath. The lead host shifted in her chair. The business analyst glanced toward the control booth. The lifestyle expert studied the edge of her mug like it could offer cover. The moment had shed its friendly skin and was now the thing beating underneath. Elias folded his hands. Calm, not evasive. "I support dignity," he said. "For people who agree with me and for people who do not." "That is not an answer," Marla said. "It is the only answer that does not turn people into jerseys." A ripple of reaction moved across the seats. A few chuckles, a few murmurs. Someone whispered, "Good line." Marla's smile cooled. "You are avoiding accountability behind poetic phrasing." Or resisting a trap with plain speech. The respected journalist on the panel tried to smooth the surface. "Perhaps we can ask about the film's community partnerships." She offered the lifeline like a host should. Marla cut across it. "He came here to promote a film. Fine. But he also benefits from the public. He owes the public clarity." "Owe is a strong word," Elias said. "I owe people honest work, fair treatment, and respect. I do not owe them my conscience on demand." The audience applauded again. Not as loud as before, but steadier, a spine forming. In the booth, a segment producer whispered, "We need a break." Another voice answered, "Not yet." The camera light held red. No cutaway. No commercial to absorb the heat. Marla tried a new angle. Soft voice. Concerned brow. "People are scared," she said. They look to those they admire for guidance. If you remain silent, you tell them nothing matters. Elias shook his head. If I prescribe their beliefs, I tell them they do not matter. That landed. You could feel it. Simple. Human. Hard to argue with without sounding like you wanted control rather than care. Marla felt it too. She changed weapons. Let's talk history, she said. There were times when silence enabled harm. You would have stayed quiet then, too. It was a heavy insinuation, the kind that frames a person without naming the frame. Some in the audience stiffened. Elias answered with care. I would have stood with people in danger, he said. I would have fed, sheltered, and protected them. With my name if it helped, without my name if it protected them more. The lifestyle expert breathed out like she had been holding her lungs for a minute. The journalist nodded once, slightly, as if granting that the thought had weight. Marla pressed the advantage she assumed she had created. Words move policy, she said. Policy saves lives. You act like statements are vanity. That is wrong. I act like statements are incomplete, Elias said. Policy built without empathy becomes performance. Words used without service become theater. The audience clapped again. A few people stood, then sat, then stood for real. The control booth finally flashed a break card to the floor manager, but the lead host held up a finger. Not yet, let it finish the beat. Marla's jaw set. She was not out of questions. She was out of patience. Do you donate to the organizations that support the cause I named, she said, or do you only donate to safe charities that keep you out of trouble? The question had teeth. It also had a shadow underneath. Suggest motive. Demand receipts. Paint any boundary as selfishness. Elias took a longer pause. Not to search. To choose. I donate where the work outweighs the press release, he said, and I decline to list names to earn your approval. The audience reacted like a wave against a seawall. Sound rose and fell. Some clapped. Some shook their heads at the trap. A few whispered that he should just say it to end the fight. Marla smelled the indecision in the seats. She went right for it. You will not answer because you fear backlash, she said. You fear losing ticket sales. You fear losing the people who buy your products. Correction, Elias said, still calm. I fear becoming someone who sells his conscience to buy applause. Silence. Tight. Complete. The kind that changes posture in a room. The journalist glanced at the clock. The business analyst finally spoke. I think we are blurring two conversations, he said. One about civic pressure on public figures. One about the dignity of private service. Marla did not look at him. She held Elias. If everyone stayed quiet like you, she said, nothing would change. If everyone shouted like you, Elias said, no one would listen. That line did not produce applause. It produced stillness, a clean landing. You could hear the electric buzz of the lighting truss. Marla's hands tightened slightly on her cards. She made a choice. She went personal. You put kindness on like a sweater, she said softly. It looks good, it sells. But when it costs you something, you fold. The insult was wrapped in velvet. It still cut. A few audience members groaned. The lifestyle expert looked down again. The lead host's eyes flashed a warning that did not reach her script. Elias did not react at first. He breathed in once, eyes steady. When he spoke, his voice dropped a register. Not anger, gravity. Kindness is not my sweater, he said. It is my spine, no music. No applause prompt. The room decided on its own. The sound started small and grew into a low, rolling support. Not a cheer. More like agreement rising from the floor. Marla pushed forward anyway. Then prove it, she said. Prove it by saying on this stage that you stand with us. With you, Elias repeated. Yes, she said. With us, he nodded once. I will stand with anyone who fights for people, he said. I will not stand inside anyone's brand. The journalist looked toward the brake light again. The floor manager circled a finger. The lead host weighed the moment in her eyes and shook her head. Let it play out. One more beat, Marla forced the binary one last time. So that is a no, she said. That is a refusal to let you turn compassion into a team sport, Elias said. A different sound filled the room. Not just applause, relief. The audience had waited for a clean sentence to hold. They had one now. The control booth yielded. The red tally went dark. The bumper music rolled. The floor manager called, "We are clear." Cameras dropped a fraction. Makeup rushed in. Water bottles appeared like rain. On set, the lead host leaned toward Elias. "We can reset," she said quietly. "Talk about the film, the mentorship program, your crew scholarship." He smiled. "Thank you." Marla stared down at her notes. She drew a short line under a question that would never be asked now. Her shoulders squared. Her face found the camera smile again. But her eyes held something flintier than before. The audience murmured. People reached for phones. A few typed fast, trying to capture quotes before they evaporated. Others sat with eyes closed as if filing the feeling in a drawer. Break ended. The red light returned. The lead host tried to reclaim the format. "We are back with Elias Vale. Your new film explores redemption through service. Tell us about the scene with the neighborhood hall." Elias began to answer. He spoke about craft, about the choice to keep the camera low so the volunteers towered over the star, about light that honored faces that never see spotlights, about a sequence where the loudest sound is hands working. It was good. It was warm. It was human. Marla waited, then slid in with a final needle. "Do you think redemption requires confession?" she asked. "Or can people buy their way to it in secret?" It was supposed to be the small cut that bleeds on live TV. It became something else. Elias turned toward her. No scowl, no smile. Just a steady truth. "Confession is for the soul," he said. "Not for the cameras." The room stood up inside. The journalist closed her notebook. The lifestyle expert finally met his eyes and whispered, "Thank you." The business analyst leaned back, hands folded, the debate in him quiet for once. Marla inhaled. She had one card left, the one that changes posture, breaks composure, forces either anger or retreat. She picked it up. "Then let us talk about where you came from," she said, "and what you hid to get here." The next question was not about policy. It was about his past, and everyone felt how sharp it would be. Some questions are knives disguised as curiosity. This one had a handle and a blade. There are moments in live broadcast where time doesn't slow. It tightens. You don't breathe slower. You breathe shallower. That was the studio now. Compressed, fragile, waiting for the next sound to crack it wide. Marla Vance tapped her card once, the soft click a signal. Not to the audience, but to herself. The line she was about to cross didn't even pretend to be subtle. "You talk about humility," she said, voice measured, "and dignity, and service. But you didn't grow up with privilege, did you? A cheap setup." Elias nodded, unsure where she intended to take it. "No, I didn't. And your family? They struggled," she continued. "Your father was incarcerated when you were young. Your mother worked as a cleaner. You've spoken about loss, hardship, yet," her chin lifted, "none of that ever compelled you to stand publicly for people who still live that struggle?" The air imploded. No gasp, no cry. Just a stunned quiet. The kind where empathy flinches before anger arrives. The lifestyle host closed her eyes. The journalist's pen froze mid-sentence. The business analyst stared down at his hands like he'd suddenly remembered something urgent and invisible. Elias didn't move. For a beat, he simply existed inside the question. Inside the wound she'd dug up and placed on the table like evidence. His voice, when it came, didn't rise. It sank, and somehow took the room with it. "You reached into my childhood like it was public property," he said quietly. "Do you think pain becomes less painful once you Google it?" A stir rolled across the seats, low, unsettled, like wind before rain. Marla wasn't finished. She leaned forward. "I think pain informs responsibility. You escaped what others can't. People listen to you. Why hide behind privacy when your voice could change lives?" She meant it as a pressure point. It landed as something colder. Elias exhaled once, not frustration, not defeat. A breath that sounded like the closing of a door inside a heart. "I didn't escape," he said. "I survived. And surviving does not make me public property." Applause erupted. Not wild, not triumphant, protective, human, like a group deciding, collectively enough, he continued. Tone soft enough to require listening, strong enough to hold the room in place. "My childhood isn't a lesson for you to assign homework to. My grief isn't a microphone you get to borrow. I help because I know what it's like to have nothing. I just don't parade the memory of being hungry so you'll clap louder." One audience member put a hand to her chest. Someone whispered, "Wow." A man in the third row held his breath like letting it out would break the moment. Marla blinked, thrown again. She regrouped fast, she always did, but the blowback in the room had shifted. Her tone sharpened. "So, private service makes you superior to those who speak publicly?" "No," Elias answered. "Private service makes me honest to myself." Her jaw twitched. "And public advocates aren't honest?" "They might be," he said. "But they shouldn't force confession as proof." A host shifted. A camera repositioned. The control booth whispered frantic half-sentences about pacing and containment. Marla wasn't interested in containment. "You could influence millions with one sentence," she said. "Instead, you choose silence and comfort." Elias looked at her. Really looked, like he was searching for the part of her that genuinely believed what she just said. What he found softened his voice further. "You think visibility equals courage," he murmured. "Sometimes it's just hunger dressed as conviction." The audience didn't cheer. They breathed in, a sound sharp enough to cut glass. Truth has a way of rearranging the room without raising volume. Marla felt the shift and struck again, this time, with venom diluted into condescension. "It's easy for you to talk about humility. You're adored. You're insulated. When have you ever risked anything?" His expression changed. Not anger, not offense, something more solemn. Memory, pain, weight. "When I was 16, he began, voice steady but lower. "I worked nights to help my mother keep the lights on. That was risk," he continued, each sentence a page turned slowly. "When my brother was lost in addiction and I used my savings to save him instead of my career, that was risk." Someone exhaled sharply. A quiet yes from the audience. "When I walked a friend through chemotherapy for 18 months and slept on hospital chairs between film shoots, risk." His eyes met hers. Unflinching, not aggressive. Simply true. "When I refused roles that mocked the people who raised me because I refused to sell dignity, that was risk." And then, "And when I chose to help quietly instead of loudly, knowing people like you would call it cowardice, that was a risk too." That was the moment the room broke. Applause didn't just erupt, it lifted, like the sound was rising from the floorboards to the rafters. Not noisy fandom applause, something weightier. Respect warming into pride. Marla's posture stiffened. She wasn't finished, but the ground beneath her had shifted, and she knew it. She tried to reset. "So that's your defense," she said, voice thin but sharpened. "You don't speak because real heroes don't need to?" Elias didn't answer right away. He let the echo settle, let the heartbeat of the room normalize again. When he spoke, it was with the gentle certainty of someone who had already made peace with the truth. "I don't speak," he said softly, "because I don't want to become the kind of person who mistakes applause for impact." Silence again, but a different kind, a reverent quiet. He added, almost a whisper, "And I don't want to become the kind of person who asks others to choose sides to prove their humanity." The journalist looked down, eyes damp. The lifestyle host touched Elias's wrist briefly, an unplanned gesture. The business analyst shook his head slowly like he was watching a building collapse in slow motion. Marla's expression flickered. Not embarrassment, not defeat. Recognition. For the briefest second, she saw herself reflected in his words. And she did not like what she saw. "Break in 10, someone mouthed off camera. Too late. The moment was already burnt into the room. Elias leaned back, letting the tension fall from his shoulders like ash. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't attacked. He simply refused to kneel to a narrative he didn't choose, and that refusal was more powerful than any speech could ever be. The lead host finally intervened. "Let's reset," she said gently. "We'll pivot after the break." The red light blinked off. The world exhaled. But Marla, eyes still locked on Elias, wasn't done. Not in her mind, not yet. She had one card left she hadn't used. One angle she believed could crack him, not his silence, not his childhood, not his philanthropy, his motives, and she would play it, even if it shattered what was left of the room. Because sometimes the loudest attack isn't meant to win. It's meant to make someone bleed publicly. Some battles are about truth. Others are about humiliation disguised as accountability. This moment held both. Break ended. Audience murmurs settled into a stillness that felt like the room was bracing itself. The cameras clicked back on, red lights blooming like warning signals. The lead host smiled her practiced, polite, reset smile. "We're back," she said gently. "We appreciate thoughtful conversation, and will continue with—" Marla cut in. "Of course she did. Actually," she said, voice sharpened to polite steel, "before we move on, I'd like to ask one final question." Every seasoned crew member on set exhaled the same silent prayer. "Don't." But Elias turned toward her, posture straight, face open, not naive, not passive, simply unwilling to meet force with fear. He had not come to win. He had come to remain whole. "What would you like to ask?" he said. Marla lifted her chin. It was the look a hunter gives the moment she believes the animal is slowing. "You talk about conscience," she began. "You talk about humility. But let's be honest, your silence is also a brand." There it was, not politics, not pain, identity. The accusation wasn't that he did nothing. It was that he benefited from doing nothing. "You built your career," she went on being the quiet good guy. "You don't speak publicly because the mystique sells." She paused. "And you don't choose sides because you want everyone's money." It hit like she'd fired it from a rifle, not spoken it. A subtle gasp pulled through the room. Not shock, recognition. She had finally said the thing every corner of the internet eventually says about people who refuse to dance for them. If you don't perform your goodness, you must be profiting from withholding it. A simpler world likes simpler villains. Elias didn't react. His stillness wasn't fear. It was patience wearing armor. He let the accusation sit in the air like smoke, trying to find something to cling to. Then he spoke. "If profit was my goal," he said quietly, "I would have played the Hollywood game a long time ago. Soft, direct, unshakable." But Marla wasn't done. She sensed the moment slipping again and lunged for control. "You've avoided controversy your whole career," she snapped. "Not because you're noble, but because it's good business." She leaned in, eyes sharp. "You're not brave. You're calculated. Silence. Not a hush, a freeze. A quiet where the truth wasn't missing. It was waiting." Elias inhaled once, then let the breath go slowly, like someone making peace with a wound before revealing it. "Calculated," he repeated. "That's one story," he paused. Then, with a steady voice, "Here's another." His eyes held hers. Not challenging. Simply refusing to shrink. "When I was 20, he said, "a director told me I would only succeed if I changed my name and changed my past." A beat. I refused. A murmur slipped through the audience. "When I turned down a franchise because they wanted to sexualize a female co-star who was 17, he continued, "I was blacklisted by that studio for years." A sharper reaction now. Surprise and anger blending. When a producer asked me to publicly support a politician in exchange for a lead role, I said no. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't swell with pride. He just told the truth like a brick placed gently on a table. And when I donated half my first big paycheck to the crew that made the film possible, Elias finished, I did it anonymously, until someone leaked it. He placed his hands together, calm, grounded. If I was calculating, I would have done the opposite of all of those things. The audience broke into applause, not explosive, but solid, like a crowd acknowledging a thing finally stated out, loud. Marla's throat moved, a swallowed reaction, but her face remained composed in the way only someone who has spent their life being watched can maintain. So, that's your excuse, she said, voice quiet now. You think that makes you righteous? Elias shook his head. No, he replied. It makes me human. Then, with the gentlest tone he'd used yet. And it means I don't weaponize my voice, even when others try to weaponize my silence. Every host on the panel froze. The lifestyle expert blinked fast, fighting tears she would never acknowledge publicly. The business analyst whispered, "That's something." The journalist stared at Elias, like she was remembering why she became a journalist in the first place. Marla still didn't move, because she hadn't lost a debate. She had been offered a mirror, and mirrors don't wound. They expose. She regrouped, clinging to the last foothold. So you'll never speak publicly about issues? She asked quietly. Elias looked at her, not angry, not dismissive, with something dangerously close to compassion. I will, he said, when my voice helps more than it harms, when the goal is people, not points, when the act is service, not performance, a breath, soft, universal, and when I do, it won't be because someone demanded it on a stage under lights. The words didn't strike like a sword. They healed like a scar. The audience rose, not loud, not frantic, but unanimous. A quiet, standing ovation that carried something reverent, rare, sacred, in its simplicity, not victory. Respect. Marla looked away first, 'cause sometimes the cruelest thing isn't losing, it's realizing you were fighting the wrong battle the entire time. But storms don't end just because the sky wants peace. There was still one authority in the room waiting to speak, and she held the power to turn the entire moment upside down. Authority does not always shout. Sometimes it clears its throat and the room obeys. The red tally stayed lit. The set breathed as one organism. The audience on its feet thinned back into chairs, the sound of fabric and wood, a soft wave returning to shore. The lead host turned slightly toward camera 2, then to Elias, then to Marla. Her eyes carried that specific calm you only earn by steering panic through live television. Thank you, she said to the audience. Let's sit. She let the quiet settle. I want to acknowledge something before we continue. What is happening here matters, because it is not just about a guest and a host. It is about what we expect from each other in public. She looked at Marla, then at Elias. No judgment, only framing. Elias, she continued, you came to talk about a film and ended up in a bigger conversation. Marla asked hard questions. You answered in a way that refused a binary. People can see both as principled. The camera found Marla. Her jaw eased half a centimeter. This was the olive branch she had not expected to need. The camera found Elias. He nodded once. Respect, not surrender. The lead host shifted to the audience. We all carry convictions. We also carry fatigue. It is tempting to turn every moment into proof. That can flatten people who are trying to live as more than proof. The control booth exhaled. She was doing it, finding the road back. And, she said evenly, our show has a responsibility. To ask, to listen, to avoid mistaking volume for virtue. That last line floated like a bell note, clean, unforced. Everyone heard it, none more than Marla. The business analyst leaned forward. Can we bring this to ground? He asked gently. Not abstract, not tribal, practical. Elias, you said action before performance. Give us an example of action that any viewer could do tomorrow that matters more than a post. Elias did not hesitate. Cook for the person in your building who does not come to the lobby events, he said. Pay a past due bill for a neighbor without leaving your name. Ask your school which student cannot afford the fall trip and cover it quietly. It does not scale for social feeds. It changes lives. Several audience members nodded. The lifestyle host added, call the community center and ask for their boring needs list. Cleaning supplies, bus passes, socks. The journalist spoke for the first time in minutes. And if someone wants to advocate in public, she asked, how do they avoid performance? Start with learning, Elias said. Attend the meeting without taking the microphone. Ask what is missing rather than offer what makes you feel useful. Follow the people already doing the work. The lead host smiled slightly. I can live with that. For the first time since the segment turned, the room felt air return to normal pressure. Marla folded her hands. She was listening. The fight in her had not vanished, but it was standing in the hallway now instead of the center of the room. She spoke carefully. I believe in using platforms, she said. I also hear the warning about demanding confession. A breath. If I crossed into that, I own it. It was not an apology to satisfy the internet. It was better. It was real enough to move the energy a little closer to human. Elias met her eyes. Thank you, he said. The lead host nodded toward the floor manager, who flashed a small 2-minute card. They had to land the plane, and she wanted to land it with everyone standing. Before we wrap, she said, I want to ask you both a question we rarely make time for. What would you change about the way you ask or answer in public? Marla went first. I would ask myself if the question is a door or a trap, she said. And if it is a trap, why I need it to be one. Elias considered his words. I would ask myself if my answer is for truth or defense. Defense rarely teaches anyone anything. The audience softened. A few phones lifted, not for outrage but for a note they wanted to keep. The journalist gestured to the monitor behind them, where a still from Elias's film appeared. A neighborhood hall full of volunteers. No one posed. No one performed. Hands were busy. Faces were ordinary. Tell us about this, she said. Elias leaned toward the image with affection. We shot with real volunteers, he explained. We paid them for their time. We kept the star out of the center of the frame. We let shoulders and hands be the story. You cannot miss the point if you cannot find a hero to worship. The lifestyle host smiled. That is a good sentence, she said. The floor manager lifted the 50-second card. The lead host saw it and went for the landing she had earned. I want to thank you both, she said, for the questions and the restraint. We are going to break. When we return, we will talk about mentorship and the crew scholarship. She faced the audience. And to those watching, if you disagreed with something you heard, keep listening. If you felt seen by something you heard, keep serving. We can do both. The red light dimmed. The bumper music rose. The set relaxed a fraction. Makeup moved forward, then hesitated, sensing the moment was not done moving, because the moment was not done. Marla was staring at her cards. One remained. She had not lifted it, but it sat there like an itch. It was the question about motives dressed as brand math, not the one she had already asked on Mystique. The other one, the one that married network interest to moral framing. She understood that to ask it would set the room on fire again. She also understood that to bury it would mean carrying it home like a stone in the pocket. She did neither. She turned to the lead host, off mic, voice quiet. May I ask one more when we come back, she said. If I ask it clean. The lead host held her eyes. Clean means no theater, she said. It means you ask to learn. Marla nodded. The red light returned. The music thinned. The lead host smiled to camera. We are back, she said. We promised mentorship and we will get there. First, Marla asked to put one more thought on the table. We said yes because we trust you to handle it with care. The audience looked at Marla. She looked back at them. Then at Elias. Is there a version, she asked, where you could use your platform in a way that felt honest to you and useful to others, where silence is not betrayal and speech is not theater? no trap, no velvet blade. A real question, Elias answered without armor, because armor was not required. Yes, he said. Name the harm. Name the humans. Share a path that lets people help locally. Then get out of the way. No slogans, no teams. Just invitations. Would you do that here? She asked. Today. If the invitation is to people and not to your brand, he said, yes. The lead host pointed to the monitor. The community center's donation page appeared with a QR code. The producer had moved faster than anyone expected. We called during the break, she said. They need bus passes and winter coats. If you want to help, give to them. If you live somewhere else, give to your local center. Send no selfies. They do not need your face. They need your help. A quiet cheer rose. Not for the show. For the idea, Elias nodded. Thank you, he said. He turned to the audience. Please do not tag me. Tag the center. Or do not tag at all. Marla smiled at that. For real this time. Fair. The journalist closed her notebook and looked into the main camera. We will link to a list of centers. We will not tally totals on air. This is not content. It is a suggestion. The floor manager lifted the final 10 card. The lead host pivoted to the film's release date and the scholarship fund for crew members. Elias kept his answers short so the camera could find the QR again. The moment was still moving through the room like weather. The red light died for the last time that hour. The studio went to black. The audience stood, clapping, not sure if they were applauding the guest, the exchange, or the chance to do something instead of argue about it. Backstage, someone from Standards and Practices was already drafting notes. Someone from Sales was already emailing the segment to advertisers with a subject line that hinted at redemption without saying it. That is how the machine survives a scare. It tells itself a useful story. On set, Marla extended her hand. Elias took it. Not a truce handshake, a human one. You pushed me, she said softly. You asked something real, he replied. She nodded. I still believe in public speech. I know, he said. And I still believe speech is smaller than service. They both smiled a little. The lead host stepped between them and touched their shoulders like a referee who had restored a game without ejecting anyone. Thank you, she said. Both of you, the audience filed out. The crew wrapped cables. A producer looked at the QR code and quietly scanned it, because sometimes even people inside the machine remember the point. The segment ended in peace, but stories do not end where cameras cut. Outside the studio, the world had already chosen its own edits. By sundown, the meaning of the moment would belong to whoever framed it first. A moment is never just a moment once the world sees it. It becomes a mirror, and not everyone likes their reflection. The studio lights cooled, replaced by the buzzing warmth of backstage exhaustion. Crew loosened headsets. Assistants gathered clipboards like shields. The smell of coffee went stale in the corners of the green room. Outside, the city carried on. Rush hour, honking taxis, street vendors packing carts, unaware that a digital tide had already begun to rise. It started quietly. A clip surfaced. 30 seconds. Grainy from a phone someone shouldn't have been filming with. Elias saying, "Kindness is not my sweater. It is my spine." Then another clip. Visibility isn't courage. Sometimes it's hunger dressed as conviction. Then another. Please don't tag me. Tag the center. They don't need your face. They need your help. By the time Elias reached the curb outside the studio, the quiet had turned to vibration. A notification storm began somewhere in the world, and like all modern storms, it spread in pulses, text chains, group chats, Twitter threads, TikTok captions, Instagram stories with half-thought reactions typed at red lights. No PR team pushed it. No network spun it. The internet moved because it recognized something unscripted, and the internet hates scripts. In the hallway, the senior producer rubbed his temples like someone piecing together a puzzle whose edges had melted. That wasn't a segment, he muttered. That was something else. one junior staffer whispered to another. "We just witnessed culture shift in real time," another whispered back. Or career sabotage. Truth, as always, stood in the middle like a referee neither side trusted. The journalist from the panel approached Elias. "Thank you." "For what?" he asked. "For proving that grace doesn't mean surrender," she said. "We forget that here." She left before he could reply. Some truths don't require acknowledgement. They just need witnesses. Behind a closed door, Marla Vance sat in front of her mirror, layers of foundation and composure beginning to crack. A makeup artist waited for a cue to begin touch-ups, but Marla waved her away. She stared at her own reflection. Not the face she rehearsed, not the posture she perfected, but the twitch in her jaw she couldn't hide. She had been the aggressor. She had been the questioned. She had also, she realized, been corrected. Not humiliated, corrected. Painfully, gracefully, publicly, and nothing cuts a performer deeper than realizing someone else refused the stage and still stole the scene. She whispered to herself, not looking away from the mirror. What if he's right? The question sat beside her like an uninvited guest she couldn't throw out. Elias declined the waiting SUV. He preferred walking when his thoughts were loud. A cold breeze rolled through the avenue. He put his hands in his coat pockets and let the chill anchor him. Fame removes grounding. Cold pavement gives it back. His phone buzzed relentlessly. Agent, publicist, sister, 2 directors, a late-night host, 3 unknown numbers, a news anchor, a friend from childhood who rarely called but never forgot him. He didn't open a single message. He breathed. He kept walking. You don't respond to a tidal wave. You let it pass before you choose whether to swim or simply exist. Across the street, a young woman paused mid-stride, staring. Recognition flashed. She lifted her phone, then lowered it again. Instead, she simply said, "Thank you." Elias nodded. No autograph, no selfie. Just a moment exchanged without needing evidence. By noon, hashtags climbed. Dignity. Before decibels. Just quiet. Strength. Yes, ask to understand. You, not everything. Needs a stage, a counterwave grew too. Silence is privilege. Speak or stand aside. No neutrality for every clip praising. Elias, another accused him of dodging. For every praise of humility, another demanded activism receipts. People weren't arguing about him. They were arguing about themselves, about how they wanted to believe the world worked. Some said, "He's right. Not everything has to be public." Others said, "He's hiding because he's scared." A famous pop star tweeted, "Some of us scream because no one listens when we whisper." An author replied, "Some of us whisper because screaming would make us liars." A politician tried to co-opt the moment. His tweet ratioed into oblivion within minutes. A community organizer posted, "We can fight loudly and quietly. Don't let them make you pick one." That one started gaining traction. Nuance had found a crack to crawl through, rare on the internet. Executives poured into a glass meeting room like generals rushing to a battlefield they didn't understand. Do we issue a statement? No, do we need to? Is this good for ratings? It's volatile. He didn't flame us. He elevated the conversation. Which is worse? Chaos disguised as strategy, someone said. This might be the most honest moment we've aired in years. Someone else replied, That's exactly what scares me. Because honesty can boost credibility, or expose rot. And networks fear exposure more than scandal. In a small diner 3 blocks away, Elias sat at a corner booth and ordered soup. The waitress didn't recognize him. Blessing. A man at the counter scrolled through his phone, shaking his head. People act like the internet is a courtroom. His friend replied, Feels like it is. Yeah, but I don't want judgment, the man muttered. I just want someone to be decent without needing applause. Elias's spoon hovered over his soup. He closed his eyes. a private moment of gratitude. Sometimes the universe answers without knowing you asked. His phone buzzed. Not a headline, not a PR crisis alert, a message from his sister. You didn't raise your voice. You just didn't bow. I'm proud, he smiled. That was enough for now. But the storm wasn't over. Outside, a news van turned the corner. Journalists smelled narrative like wolves smell heat off a deer trail. They weren't coming for destruction. They were coming for ownership of the moment. Because culture never leaves truth untouched. It repackages it, sells it, weaponizes it, romanticizes it, and somewhere soon, on air, in print, on screens, someone would ask, was this courage or convenience? And they'd miss the point entirely. He didn't need a label. He needed integrity to remain untraded. Rehook. The world was reacting. But soon, a voice that had remained silent through the episode would step forward, not to defend Elias, but to complicate the story in a way no one expected. Because every movement of truth awakens opposition, not always from enemies. Sometimes from people who love you and don't agree with your quiet. Support is easy when someone wins. Real friendship appears when truth gets complicated. Evening settled like a tired exhale over the city. Streetlights flickered on, cars hummed by, and 1,000 living room televisions replayed the moment like a cultural earthquake on loop. Inside a quiet apartment far from the studio, Elias sat on the edge of his couch, tie loosened, dinner untouched. The world outside buzzed louder than a hornet's nest, but in here it was still. Too still. That kind of stillness carries weight. It asks questions you can't answer publicly. His phone vibrated again. Unknown caller. He let it ring. Then it buzzed with a text instead. Pick up. It's me. He sighed, half smile, half surrender, and answered. Hey. On the other end, a familiar voice, warm but edged with tension. You okay? I'm all right, Elias replied. You sure? Feels like you just walked barefoot across glass on live television. Elias chuckled softly. Something like that, silence. Not hostile, thoughtful. Then the voice asked, So, are you ready for my honest reaction? Elias leaned back. Go ahead, you were dignified. You were composed. You didn't break, and I admire that. A beat. But I don't fully agree with you. There it was, clean, direct, no applause attached. Elias rubbed his brow. I figured, you know I love you, the voice continued. You know that. But quiet virtue isn't universal. Sometimes silence protects the wrong people. Elias didn't flinch. He'd lived long enough to know true disagreement doesn't break things. It reveals if they were real to begin with. I never claimed silence was the answer, he said. Just my answer. For today, his friend sighed. The internet won't hear it that way. They're already treating you like a saint or a coward. No middle ground allowed. Elias looked out the window. Middle ground isn't sexy. No, the voice said. But it's honest. And honesty rarely trends. He smiled quietly. You sound like you're defending me. I am, the friend replied. And also challenging you. Elias nodded. I expect nothing less. Good, because I know what you're afraid of. His posture shifted. Do you? Yes, you're afraid your voice will be weaponized the moment you use it. Elias froze for half a second. That sentence had reached a door he seldom unlocked. The friend continued, tone softer. You don't fear speaking. You fear being turned into a headline instead of a human. That landed too close to truth to deny. Elias swallowed. Maybe. No, maybe, the voice replied. You watched the world chew up people louder than you. You won't feed yourself to that machine. I get it. But don't confuse fear with wisdom. The words hung there, heavy but not cruel. Real friends don't hand you comfort when clarity is needed, Elias thought, then answered, I choose my battles. That isn't fear. It's stewardship, a hum of acknowledgement. Sometimes stewardship looks a lot like self-protection. And sometimes shouting looks a lot like ego wearing armor, Elias countered. Touché. The friend laughed under their breath. We're both stubborn. Yes, Elias said. That's why we're still here. Another moment of quiet. Then the friend's voice sobered. Just promise me something. What? When you do need to speak, truly speak, don't hide behind humility. Elias sat forward, elbows on knees. I wouldn't. Good, they replied. Because some of us need your voice. Not always loud, not always first, but present. When it matters, he let the words settle. When it matters, he repeated. And Elias? Yeah, today mattered. You didn't win everyone, but you changed something. That's not nothing. He closed his eyes. I hope so. You did. But don't get comfortable in the praise, he laughed. Never have. Good. Call me tomorrow. Then the tone of voice shifted. Lighter again. Like tension evaporating from a storm cloud after lightning finally strikes. And eat something. You dramatic philosopher, Elias smiled. Good night, the call ended. The world was still loud, but inside him something steadied. Sometimes truth gets sharpened by agreement, sometimes by friction. Today he had both, and both mattered. People sat in their living rooms watching replays. Comments stacked like bricks building opinion fortresses. Every viewer saw a different truth in the moment. Some saw bravery, some saw avoidance, some saw grace, some saw calculation. Most saw themselves. It wasn't about the interview anymore. It was about the hunger we all carry to be seen as good and the fear of performing it wrong. One high school teacher paused the video and whispered, He's right. I'm tired of shouting online just to prove I care. A college activist replied under a clip, Silence protects oppressors. He's romanticizing neutrality. A father wrote, Some of us don't have time to tweet morality. We're working, feeding kids, surviving. A grad student commented, He's refusing binary. That's resistance, too. A retired nurse texted her daughter, That man reminds me of your grandfather. And somewhere in a quiet apartment, a single mom stared at the screen and said softly, He didn't say what side he's on. But somehow I trust him more than the people who shout every day telling me how to live. Different hearts, different bruises, different truths leaking through the same window. Marla stepped into her car, closed the door, and exhaled. Not triumph, not defeat, something more complicated. Growth beginning where ego cracked. She pulled down the visor, looked at her face in the mirror, the face the world expected to be unbreakable, and whispered, Next time. I ask to understand first. Not a surrender, a recalibration, and that was its own kind of victory. He finally ate, half a sandwich, then sat back and let simplicity soothe him. He was tired, not from combat, but from staying soft when pushed to hardness. His phone buzzed again. Media offers, praise, outrage, invitations to clarify his stance, attempts to crown him or crucify him. He turned the phone over, screen down, not tonight. Instead, he whispered to the quiet, Service before stage. People before applause, always no camera, no spotlight. No hashtag, just truth where truth matters most. Inside himself first. Rehook for final chapter. But storms echo, and the world does not simply move on because decency spoke. The next morning would bring headlines, think pieces, opportunists, and unexpected allies, and one invitation that would test Elias in a way no interview ever could. Because conviction only matters when it costs you again. A moment lives twice, once in truth and once in the reaction. The second life is harder to survive. When dawn broke, it did not break gently. Light cut through the blinds like lines of interrogation, striping Elias's quiet living room. The world outside was already humming. Delivery trucks, joggers, early commuters, a rhythm indifferent to fame or discourse. But his phone did not share the city's indifference. It pulsed with so many notifications it looked like it was shivering. Mentions, headlines, requests, demands, gratitude, fury, think pieces and memes, and, quote, cards with his words, sometimes correct, sometimes butchered into slogans he would never author. He didn't touch it, not yet. Instead, he brewed coffee. Slow, methodical, the way a person steadies their breathing before stepping into cold water. He poured it, sat, and finally faced the small glowing storm on the table. He didn't open apps. He opened one thing only, a text from his sister. Breakfast? People are loud today. Come hide here, he smiled. Relief disguised itself as gratitude. He typed back one word, coming. But fate, or whatever name you give the force that interrupts our plans, arrived before he could grab his keys. 3 sharp knocks, not hesitant, not aggressive. Official Elias froze. Not from fear, from anticipation. He knew this sound. You don't spend years in public life without learning that knock. He opened the door. A network executive stood there. Immaculate suit, careful smile, the kind of tealess confidence worn by those who believe. They manage culture rather than witness it. Beside him stood a young PR strategist clutching a tablet and a nervous expression. Elias. The executive began warmly. You have a minute? Elias nodded, and they stepped inside without waiting for him to invite them, the way people do when they think the world belongs to them. We wanted to discuss yesterday. Of course, Elias said, calm, neutral. The strategist inhaled like she was preparing to dive into ice. First, she said quickly, the moment is everywhere, trending on every platform. You're being called a symbol of quiet resistance. She glanced up. That's the phrase now. Congratulations, the exec added, hands clasped like a pastor delivering good news wrapped in marketing. You've ignited a cultural narrative. Elias sipped his coffee. I didn't ignite anything, the executive waved a hand. Semantics were for poets. He was in the business of story control. We should get ahead of this, he continued. Shape it. You could put out a thoughtful statement. Clarify your position. Lean into the humanity angle. No hashtags, the strategist added quickly as if offering a humanitarian concession. Just guided messaging. It would help soften the polarization. Elias set his mug down. What if I don't want to guide anyone? The strategist blinked. People didn't usually respond with plain sentences in this industry. They responded with posture and positioning. The executive chuckled. You don't need to posture. Just let us help you frame this. You can use this energy. Elevate your platform, launch a foundation, maybe even a speaking series about dignity in public discourse. He said the phrase like he'd trademarked it already. Elias lifted an eyebrow. Turn it into a brand. Into a movement, the executive corrected. And movements, Elias replied. Eventually ask people to chant, silence. Thick. The strategist looked away, like truth had entered the room uninvited and she didn't know where to put it. The executive's voice softened. Sugar coating the hook. This moment is bigger than you. People need direction. Do they? Elias answered. Or do they just need permission to think without choosing a team first? The strategist exhaled, frustrated. People are demanding you pick a side. People or platforms? Elias asked. She hesitated. That was the answer. The executive leaned forward. If you remain ambiguous, you risk losing half the audience. Elias smiled faintly. If I choose, I lose the other half. You could lose both, the strategist whispered. Neutrality is dangerous. No, Elias said gently. Ambition disguised as morality is dangerous. The phrase dissolved every prepared talking point in the room. The strategist swallowed. The executive exhaled sharply through his nose, reassessing. For the first time, his smile faded into irritation. Authenticity is charming, until it interferes with strategy. So, your position, he said, is to do nothing? No, Elias corrected. My position is to act quietly and refuse to let you turn compassion into content. A clean hit. The strategist flinched. Not offended, just stunned that someone had spoken the line people in her world only whispered to themselves. The executive straightened. "If you decline to shape this, others will shape it for you." Elias nodded. "Let them. My truth doesn't require management." They left with polite goodbyes coated in frustration. They wanted to help him win a narrative. He refused to play the game. He closed the door behind them and let silence return. He didn't gloat. He didn't doubt. He simply breathed. One deep breath, because integrity may be simple, but it is never light. At his sister's apartment, kids argued over cereal, cartoons played too loud, toast burned in a pattern only children would eat with pride. His sister opened the door, messy bun, tired eyes, full heart. "You look like someone who was just visited by Suits." "I was. You tell them to go manufacture their own morals." Something like that. She hugged him, long, stable, real. "I'll make eggs." That was all he needed. It was always all he needed. Cable hosts prepared segments. Is quiet virtue just privilege? Has Elias Vale sparked a new kind of activism? Hero or hypocrite? Influencers filmed think pieces in ring light confessionals, eager to capture nuance they didn't feel but wanted credit for recognizing. A late-night comedian joked, "Elias Vale says silence can be noble, which is good news for the next time I forget my anniversary." A podcast host countered, "Performative outrage isn't activism. Sometimes the loudest person in the room is just auditioning." Comment sections split like tectonic plates. And somewhere a young person watched and whispered, "I don't know what's right, but I want to live like someone who doesn't lie for claps." That was enough. More than enough. Later, as Elias washed dishes with his niece humming beside him, his sister leaned on the counter and asked quietly, "Do you ever worry that being good quietly makes you invisible?" He looked at the soap bubbles in his hands. At the small life moment unfolding, "At peace earned, not inherited, no," he said. "It makes me present," she nodded. "And when the world pushes again?" He smiled, "Then I'll push back, gently." But gentleness would soon be tested, because that afternoon an email would arrive. From someone powerful, someone hurt, someone who believed loudness was life and silence was betrayal. A request not for conflict this time, but for collaboration. And he would have to decide if grace extended to those who tried to break him. Peace is never the end. It's the pause before the next question asks who you really are. By late afternoon, sunlight had settled into a golden quiet across Elias's kitchen. Dishes dried in a rack. His niece napped on the couch, clutching a stuffed owl like a secret she didn't want the world to borrow. His sister folded laundry and hummed, a soft, steady rhythm, the kind that keeps a home anchored. Elias sat by the window with a cup of tea, feeling the rare stillness soak into him. No cameras, no stage, just ordinary life, the place he trusted most. His phone buzzed. Once, then again, longer. The low, insistent vibration of a message someone hoped would not go ignored. He let it sit. Moments of peace deserve respect. After a breath, he checked it, a single email notification. Subject line, "You don't know me, but I needed yesterday." He opened it. "Elias, I watched the segment from the hospital waiting room this morning. My son is fighting a battle I don't post about. I don't have speeches in me, only hope, quiet hope. People tell me I should raise awareness. I just want to raise my boy. Yesterday, you said dignity doesn't need an audience. I needed to hear that. The world demands noise. I only have breath. Thank you for giving breath a place. I don't want anything from you. Just wanted you to know your silence spoke to someone." With respect, a parent trying to stay whole, Elias read it twice, then set the phone down and closed his eyes. Not to shut the world out, but to let it in more gently. It wasn't applause that moved him. It wasn't validation. It was truth landing where it mattered. A private place in another person's life. Then came the second buzz. A new message. This one from a name he recognized instantly. A filmmaker known for loud activism, fiery speeches, and polarizing conviction. Someone adored and criticized in equal measure. Someone who had, just weeks earlier, publicly accused celebrities of moral cowardice for staying neutral. Subject line: "We should talk." He opened it. "I was hard on you in interviews. I believed your silence was convenience. Maybe I was wrong. Watch your segment twice. Realized not every voice serves the world the same way. Loud isn't the only brave. Quiet isn't the only moral. If you ever want to explore speaking quietly together, one loud, one gentle, I'd like to try. Not a panel. Not a brand. A conversation, real one. If not, respect either way." Elias leaned back in his chair. This wasn't praise, and it wasn't surrender. It was something harder, something rarer. A person changing their mind without asking the world to clap for them. He typed a simple reply. "Let's talk. Quiet room. No cameras. If a conversation is honest, it doesn't need an audience." He pressed send. Later, as the sky dimmed and porch lights blinked on across the neighborhood, Elias stepped outside. Cool air, distant traffic. Kids laughing 2 blocks over. A dog barked with the authority of someone who believed the world needed his voice. He smiled. A reporter's van rolled past, slowed, then kept going. Someone, somewhere, was deciding which version of him to broadcast tomorrow. Hero, coward, mystic, fraud, threat, beacon. Labels were cheap. Living truth wasn't. He whispered to no one and everyone. "Let the world argue. I'll keep acting, not performing, not defending. Acting, in the quiet sense. He wasn't rejecting speech. He was refusing to let noise replace meaning. And tomorrow, he would meet someone who believed the opposite. Not to fight, not to win, but to learn whether 2 truths could sit in the same room and build something real. That was courage too. Not the kind broadcast, but the kind lived. Because in a world addicted to applause, sometimes the most radical sentence is, "I don't need you to see me, to be who I am." Fade out, no anthem. No spotlight, just a person choosing dignity over audience, and the world, loud as it is, paused for a second to hear it.